So I'm very glad now to be again coming more from the policy-making side and informing you not about what I'm doing mostly, which is really dealing with programming and planning of the EDF, but also EDIRPA and ASAP, but informing you about the new package, which my previous speaker has already just mentioned, the new European defense industry strategy and the related program, which we have recently put on the table. So this program was, and the strategy really spurred by what we see as a new kind of security paradigm that has emerged, of course, with the Russian aggression against Ukraine. And it showed more than ever the sentence which we hear in Brussels level already for quite some years. The EU must make more, must take more, and must do more and take more responsibility for its own security. And I think here this sentence is really true more than ever before. But before I go into EDIS, so the strategy, the new strategy which we put on the table, and EDIP, the related program, let me go a step back. The Commission actually responded relatively quickly to the outbreak or after the outbreak of war in Ukraine by putting forward two urgency programs to mobilize a budget, an EU budget in support of Ukraine. The first one was the ASAP program, so it was quickly and a quick shot, 500 million program to support the ramping up of European industry's capacity to produce ammunition and missiles, and then EDIRPA, a program with 310 million budget, EU budget to incentivize for the first time ever, EU member states and Norway to cooperate and jointly procure what they consider the most urgently needed defense products and systems in support of Ukraine, or to refill their depleted stocks of equipment which they gave to Ukraine, or to increase their own resilience. So both programs entered into force in mid and autumn last year, and today we are already preparing contracts to provide funding support and providing EU funding support for 31 ASAP projects in 16 member states to modernize or extend their production capacities for ammunition production or to build new ones. That's really record speed for an EU program. All going well, these projects should help to increase the EDTIB's capacity for shell production in Europe to 2 million by the end of 2025. With this, ASAP has clearly demonstrated that where there is a will to pool resources and to mobilize resources at European level, we are really able to effectively stimulate the industrial production capacity. And this is what the new strategy and the new program is about. As concerns joint procurement, calls for proposals under the EDIRPA program have been launched recently, and consortia of member states and Norway now have time until 25 July to submit proposals for projects or joint programs which they would like to launch or have launched to jointly procure ammunition, air missile defense systems or platforms for which they want to receive EU funding to compensate for the costs of really acting jointly in that case. We hope to be able to provide funding here again for first projects in really speedy time before the end of the year or by the end of the year. However, we are also aware and know very much that the criticism that is coming is that this is a first good step and a right step in the right direction, but it is actually a first aid measure if you so wish. Industry needs to produce more, and it needs to produce faster to respond to EU member states' needs in the light of these new security challenges which we're facing, and to provide support to Ukraine. That is why on the 5th of March, the Commission, together with the High Representative, adopted the EU's new defense industrial strategy, EDIS, and we're already here again in full implementation mode. On the same day, the Commission also put forward a proposal for a regulation to set up a new program. It was already mentioned by my previous speaker, so the European Defence Industry Programme, EDIP. It will be the cornerstone and the key instrument for the implementation of the strategy. In a nutshell, this really groundbreaking defense package seeks to strengthen the competitiveness of our defense industry by increasing its responsiveness and increasing its resilience. And this will ultimately contribute to increasing what we call defense industrial readiness. And furthermore, the strategy outlines a vision of how we can now come from acting in a crisis mode, which is what we have done with ASAP and EDIRPA, to a structured long-term adaptation of our defense industrial base in Europe to the new security environment. So let me now turn for a moment to, or for the remainder of my presentation, almost to the specifics of the strategy and just name some of the novel measures it proposes as part of a large and very ambitious toolbox, in many cases to be implemented, as I already said, through the EDIP program. EDIS is structured around 5 areas of work. The first one, we need to strengthen the coordination of the expression of defense needs of member states in order to limit fragmentation of demand and its harmful impact on industrial supply. In short, we have this wonderful sentence in the communication which sums it all up. We need to invest more, we need to invest better, we need to invest together, and we need to invest in Europe. While member states increased their defense investment continuously over the past 8 years, and there were also the previous speaker who talked about this, 78% of member states' defense acquisitions at that time, or it went to, between the start of the war in Ukraine and June 2023, were made from sources outside the EU. And only 18% of defense procurements in 2023 were done jointly, despite increasing needs of all member states for new equipment. To change this, we want to extend the logics, or the EDIRPA logic, the program which we have started and tested here under the EDIP. But we are also aware that we need to do a lot more. We also propose to set up a Defense Industrial Readiness Board, bringing together member states, the Commission, the High Representative, to come to a more structured approach to programming, priority setting, and procurement, to deconflict procurement plans of different member states, and to identify constructively joint procurement opportunities. This new programming and procurement function will not reinvent the wheel, of course. It will build on existing priority setting instruments for defense capability needs of our EU member states, such as the CDP, so the Capability Development Plan, CARD, the Strategic Compass, and it would also, of course, orient itself around what's happening in the PESCO framework. In addition, EDIP will provide for a new legal framework to be made available to member states, which we call the Structure for European Armament Programme. So you may call it CEAP or CEAP, still not clear how it's going to be pronounced. This is going to be a vehicle to support defense cooperation throughout the capability life cycle, so really starting from, if you so wish, the cradle to the grave, with F&E activities, to really looking at the end part of defense equipment, potentially recycling stage. We also want to launch the European defense projects of common interest that will contribute to the Union's and member states' free access to contested areas such as cyber, space, air, and maritime, and to contribute to the implementation of EU capability development priorities, so big capability priority projects which are here in mind. So the concept is not new. It exists in other policy areas. We're just trying to amend, adapt it, and use this really great cooperation platform also in the defense domain. And finally, we propose to launch a pilot for a European military sales mechanism. It should increase awareness of the availability of defense products from our EDT by IB. So what can our industry do? What systems do they have? What equipment can we buy? What is available? And facilitate their acquisition and the speed up of delivery time, including through government-to-government purchases, which are already foreseen in a legal framework under the Directive for defense procurement for many, many years. Finally, let me just say, we also want to make sure under the EDIP, and we discussed it, and I add that because I had an interesting discussion about that over lunchtime, that what we do and the money we invested and the budget we invested, the effort to jointly develop equipment, systems, technology under the EDF is then also taken forward and ensured that they come to what we say a state of industrialization, and that if they are jointly procured from member states, that this will be sort of rewarded and seen positively under the EDIP. Here, details to be defined, of course. The objective of all these measures which I just mentioned and all these tools have one joint purpose: to make joint procurement the norm wherever relevant and possible. Let me come to the second work strand of the EDIS. We need to ensure the availability of defense products in all circumstances. That means we need to strengthen the capacity of European industry to ensure the production, availability, and supply of defense products in the right volume and time to meet member states' needs. So it's about making sure that member states' armed forces get what they need when they need it. More concretely here, we propose in the context of the EDIP program to continue not only the ASAP intervention logic, I mentioned the ASAP program and its output so far and results so far. We want to continue to support the industrial ramp-up in the Union by expanding the scope of this ASAP intervention logic, so going beyond ammunition production and missile production. We also propose to complement this with the development of so-called ever-warm facilities and with the creation of a fund called FAST that provides debt and equity funding for SMEs and mid-caps to help them to ramp up their production capacities. And we have or can build here on experiences which we have with a very similar instrument created under the EDF just a few years or just a year ago. We also propose to establish a modular and gradual security of supply regime to enhance solidarity and effectiveness in response to tensions along the supply chains or in security crisis situations. This may be the one of, or the biggest or the most important thing that became most apparent from our activities in support of the recent medical production or vaccine production under the COVID crisis. And it surely came out in the context of the ramping up activities to support Ukraine. The strategy's third work strand focuses on spreading the culture of readiness in all economic activities and in all EU policies. This concerns, first of all and foremost, but not only, access to finance. It also touches on all aspects of creating and ensuring an appropriate regulatory environment for European defense industry and access to a skilled workforce. Let me focus a bit on this access to finance issue. We had heard earlier that it is, or that the EIB group and the governing bodies have announced that they will now sort of redevelop or redefine the dual use definition, if you so wish. For us, we want to push further here and really urge the EIB group's governing bodies to review and further review their lending policies and to adapt them to EU policy objectives and new realities, and that means change of policies to allow support to defense industries going really beyond dual use. At the end, access to finance will be essential if we want to ensure the ramp-up of defense industrial production capacities in Europe. And that brings me to the fourth strand of EDIS: provide the Union with financial means to achieve the ambitions it set out in its strategy. With EDIP, we are already mobilizing, again, 1.5 billion of EU budget for the EDTIB, with the intention of generating a leverage effect, of course. We are also looking to enable the use of windfall profits generated by frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine, if and hopefully when all the necessary political decisions are taken. And we are engaging already in the urgent necessary financial needs at the European level in order to prepare the next multi-annual framework of the EU starting in 2028. And here, of course, our aim is to propose an ambitious budget for defense that goes hopefully well beyond what we have seen in total under this MFF. And finally, the fifth strand of work that EDIS sets out: we need to team up with strategic partners who share the same values. This will include developing ever closer ties with Ukraine, including the industrial level, and strengthening our structured dialogue with NATO. Let me first focus on support to Ukraine. Under the EDIP program, Ukraine will, to the extent as possible in legal terms, be treated as a member state. This will imply opening most EDIP activities to Ukraine and its industry, except the proposed European defense projects for common interest, which I mentioned earlier. It will also involve the setting up of a specific instrument within the EDIP to support Ukraine's recovery, reconstruction, and modernization of the Ukrainian defense industrial base. Among the concrete initiatives which you also propose to take forward industrial cooperation with Ukraine is the intention to open an EU innovation office in Kiev. As concerns NATO, the strategy underlines that a stronger and more competent union in security and defense will contribute to global and transatlantic security and is complementary to NATO, which remains, and that is clearly stated, the foundation of collective defense for its members. We will enlarge in more concrete terms our existing structured dialogues with NATO staff, which we already have for years, on defense industry activities and topics of mutual interest. We will in particular reinforce our efforts to promote the use of NATO standards, so STANAG, which we, by the way, already do very proactively through the EDF. And by the way, also with the help of the European Defence Agency that really advises us and helps us a lot in that domain. The strategy also proposes that the two organizations exchange views and explore synergies and complementarity of efforts in the really crucial area of supply chain security. Let me close here my overview of the key strands of our new defense strategy and the related proposed EDIP program. There would be, of course, a lot more to say, but I hope that together, or I could nevertheless give you a good idea and some insights in what we propose to do and why. Together, these two initiatives, the strategy and the related program, they provide a large and novel toolbox, a legislative toolbox on the one hand, and a financial toolbox with financial initiatives on the other hand. There are many challenges associated with what we are trying to achieve with this new defense package. Not only do we propose many very new initiatives and tools, but the impact of those initiatives could potentially also be very significant. We need to ensure the buy-in from all member states, which are already examining and negotiating the EDIP proposal in Council. We also need to achieve this, the buy-in from the European Parliament, once it will take up work again after the European elections. And we need also the buy-in of industry, for whom, let's say, most of these initiatives are geared at to increase their production capacity, readiness, and resilience. We are working very closely with all stakeholders, of course, to get the EDIs, get EDIs implemented as quickly as we can, and to get EDIP adopted as quickly as possible. With ASAP and EDIRPA, we have shown already that we can act fast at EU level. Hard to believe, but it is doable. And we will then show with EDIP and EDIS and try to show that we can do it again. At the end, a lot is at stake here at the moment. Without ensuring defense industrial readiness, we will not be able to do what it takes to face the challenges linked to the new security paradigm, which, as I said in the start of my intervention, is just here to stay. So thank you very much for your attention.